Hey, before we begin, a quick note. The stories on this channel are based on real cases, but the names of the people involved have been changed, and graphic or violent language has been filtered out. With that said, let's open the file. The man in seat 18E paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket on the shortest flight of the day. He wore a dark suit, a white shirt, and a black clip-on tie. He ordered a bourbon and soda before the plane left the ground. And somewhere in the first few minutes of a 30-minute flight, he handed the flight attendant a folded note. She assumed he was passing her his phone number. It happened to crews all the time. She slipped it into her pocket without reading it. He leaned closer and said quietly, "Miss, you should look at that note. I have a bomb. This is a real case. The names of the crew and witnesses have been changed. The name the man gave was already false. It was November 24th, 1971, the afternoon before Thanksgiving. Northwest Orient Flight 305 was a milk run, a half-hour hop from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, and it was barely a third full. The man had given the ticket agent the name Dan Cooper. Witnesses put him in his mid-40s, around 6 feet tall, unremarkable in every way that mattered. He was the kind of passenger no one looks at twice. It would never be that easy to describe him again. The flight attendant, we will call her Florence, read the note. It was printed in neat felt-tip capitals. It said he had a bomb in his briefcase and that he wanted her to sit beside him. She sat. He opened the case just wide enough for her to see inside, red cylinders, a battery, and wire. Then he gave her his demands, and they were oddly specific. $200,000 in negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle when they landed. She carried the message to the cockpit. What everyone who dealt with him that day remembered afterward was how calm he was. He was polite. He paid his drink tab. He offered to request meals for the crew while they waited. The other passengers were told there was a small mechanical problem. For more than 2 hours, while the aircraft circled Puget Sound in the dark and the rain, 36 people read newspapers and dozed, never knowing what the man a few rows back had in his briefcase. On the ground, the airline agreed to pay. A Seattle bank assembled 10,000 $20 bills, and every single one was run through a microfilm camera first, so his serial number was on record. The parachutes took longer. He had insisted on 4, and investigators understood the arithmetic immediately. If he might force a crew member to jump with him, no one could risk handing over a sabotage chute. Whoever he was, he had thought about how this would look from the other side. Flight 305 landed at Seattle just after 5:30 in the evening. The money came aboard in a canvas bag. The passengers walked down the front stairs into the terminal, most of them learning from reporters what they had just been part of. The man kept the pilots, a flight engineer, and 1 flight attendant. We will call her Tina. Then he laid out the second half of the plan, and it was stranger than the first. Fly to Mexico City, he said, but fly low, 10,000 feet. Landing gear down, wing flaps at 15 degrees, cabin unpressurized, and the rear stairway, the built-in staircase that folded down from the tail of the aircraft, lowered. The crew told him the plane could not take off that way. Fine, he said. He would handle the stairs himself. A slow airspeed, a route south, a refueling stop in Reno. He knew the aircraft. He knew exactly what it could do. They took off again at 7:36 p.m. into a cold front, rain, wind, a ceiling of cloud. He sent Tina to the cockpit and told the crew to stay there. The last thing she saw, looking back down the dim cabin, was the man tying the bag of money to himself with cord he had cut from one of the parachutes. Then the cockpit door closed, and no one ever saw him again. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the forests of southwest Washington, the crew felt it, a sudden bump of pressure, and the tail of the aircraft flexing, as if a weight had just left the rear stairs. They flew on to Reno as instructed. When the plane landed and officers finally came aboard, the cabin was empty. The rear stairway hung open. On seat 18E lay a black clip-on tie. Consider what stepping off those stairs meant. It was a November night in a storm. At that altitude and speed, the wind chill was somewhere near 70 degrees below zero. Below him was blackness. No lights, no landmarks, mile after mile of dark timber and river canyon. He wore a business suit and street shoes. He jumped anyway. The search began at first light. The FBI called the case Norjack. Searchers walked the calculated drop zone in lines. Aircraft flew grid patterns over the river country for weeks. They found nothing. No parachute canopy in the trees. No camp, no remains, no scrap of a dark suit. And the money never moved. 10,000 recorded serial numbers, and in the months that followed, not one of them surfaced anywhere in circulation. It was as if the man had stepped out of the aircraft and out of existence in the same moment. Even his name dissolved. He had told the ticket agent, Dan Cooper. In the first hours of the story, a wire reporter working fast off a police source garbled it, and the mistake went out on the news wires as DB the correction never caught up. To this day, the most famous name in the case is a name nobody ever used. The next year brought the copycats, more than a dozen men who tried some version of the same jump. One of them, a decorated veteran we will call Ray Markham, took over $500,000 out the back of a jet and was arrested within days. Plenty of people decided he had been Cooper all along. The FBI ruled him out. The description did not fit, and his whereabouts that Thanksgiving Eve were accounted for. That is how it went, over and over. Every promising suspect dissolved on contact with the file. Then, 9 years later, the case did something no one expected. In February of 1980, a family was picnicking on a sandbar called Tenna Bar on the Columbia River north of Portland. Their 8-year-old son, we will call him Brian, was raking the sand to build a fire pit when he uncovered 3 bundles of $20 bills, rotted and fused together, the rubber bands still holding. $5,800. The FBI checked the serial numbers. Every bill was from the ransom. It should have broken the case open. Instead, it broke every theory. Tenna Bar sits miles from the calculated drop zone, and the currents and the flight path do not agree on how the money could have arrived there. And the rubber bands were the quietest problem of all. They do not survive years of tumbling down a river. Something, or someone, placed that money gently. The find that was supposed to be an answer has spent 4 decades as a question. The suspects kept coming for half a century. More than 1,000 names were run through the file. There were deathbed confessions, and relatives certain of an uncle or a husband. None of them held. In 2017, scientists ran a particle analysis on the clip-on tie he left on his seat, and found traces of pure titanium and rare earth elements, materials that, in 1971, pointed toward a man who worked in aerospace or advanced manufacturing. A tantalizing profile, attached to no one. In the summer of 2016, after 45 years, the FBI closed its active investigation. It remains the only unsolved hijacking in the history of American commercial aviation. The evidence, the tie, the ransom bills from the riverbank, sits preserved, waiting for a name. So the story ends where it began, with a man in seat 18E that nobody looked at twice. Either he was gone within minutes of stepping into that storm, and the timber country kept him, as it has kept others. Or he came down through the dark, buried what he had to bury, and went back to being the kind of man no one ever describes. Both endings fit every fact we have. The file is closed. The question is not. Most of these cases never close. If you want to sit with the ones that don't, subscribe. There's a new file every few days.